Okay, so I'm going to be trying a little bit of a different format this time. I'm going to be combining both the low and the high tier armies, and I might remake the high elf video to reflect this. So I guess expect an update video for that. So this might turn out to mean like longer videos, but if I get the core principles down, then likely I can just fast forward through most of the actual gameplay and just slow down for certain like key moments and keep the video shorter that way. So we're gonna start with the cheap Dowie army. So the low tier army. This is something that you would likely be using like in the first 50 turns, like prior to the first 50 turns or so. So it's mostly warriors, a couple miners with blasting charges, 5 coilers, and 3 catapults. So this battle is kind of a punching uphill battle. There are, I believe, 3 units of Blackworks for the greenskins, and I think they have 2 regular orc boys. Yeah, 2 regular orc boys, and then what? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think 4 orc boy big guns. Let me see. Did I miscount one? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, looks like 4 orc boy big guns, and 1, 2, 3 black orcs, and then 2 orc boys, and then we got orc error boys. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 2 catapults, grudge or not grudge thrower, but rock lobbers, and then 2 orc boar boys. So it's a pretty like high tier army. Like you wouldn't really expect to see an army like this in like the first 50 turns of the game during like a siege battle, but this could like reflect if there was a siege that was going on that also had a stack. Like for example, if you were going up against I don't know, any one of like the major lords of like the greenskins like camping inside of a garrison who might have like recruited a couple blackworks, or like Grimgore with like a unit of blackworks or so. But the idea here is to show that this army, at least during siege battles, can definitely punch upwards into these kinds of and claim victory in these kinds of fights against these kinds of units, these higher, much higher tier units. In a regular land battle, it would be a devastating loss for the Dowie. So I'm just going to fast forward, as this game basically starts out a lot like the High Elf game, if you've watched that, but I'll just kind of do a short recap while we fast forward. Basically put your heroes or lords in the front, allow them to absorb the tower fire. As you can see, they take very little damage. And focus fire with the grudge throwers, the 2 main towers. That will be the threat. This tower can be a threat, which is why you would move your army outside of the range of this tower for like the rest of the battle. Because when you're up against a garrison with this many units, they will eventually fill this area up and the tower will go online, and if your units are caught out, they will take damage. The other thing is, now there are these, excuse me, goblin rock lobbers. Now they can be very devastating. As you can see, they're already chipping away at our coilers here because I let them overextend past like the safe zone into the possible range of fire of these rock lobbers. So they are the second target if possible. You could just kind of ignore them also and then just hug the corner over here with the coilers. But you could and then save like the ammo from these shots on the rock lobbers and use them on the blackworks instead. It probably would make things a little bit easier on the infantry fight if the rock lobbers, or not the rock lobbers, but if the grudge throwers were not used on the rock lobbers and they were used on the blackworks instead. As you can see, since they're firing at near max range, they kind of overshoot or like miss like quite a bit. So like a lot of ammunition is wasted on trying to like get these guys off of their trebuchets, or their catapults technically. Now you don't actually have to finish off the crew. Once they get down to a certain amount of HP, they won't get back on the siege pieces, and they'll just usually run up onto the wall. So now that I've basically taken their artillery pieces offline, I'm going to put my quarrelers in range, and we're going to begin to focus fire on the orc arrow boys. Now the thing about this is, again, we outrange the orc arrow boys, so we don't really have to worry too much about taking damage, except for when the AI occasionally allows one of the units to creep forward, like what happened there. And as you can see, they make quick work of these arrow boys as they are unarmored, and the quarrelers have decent accuracy. And then after we wipe out most of the units on the wall, at least the threatening ones in the arrow boys, we focus on the Lord next, because the greenskin is a leadership dependent faction. So taking out their leadership early in the game will allow for routing their units off the battlefield easier, or more easily. It's really strange doing these kind of commentaries, because in live stream, it feels like it's easier to talk during live stream than it is for like a pre-recorded video, which is kind of strange. As you can see, the quarrelers make, pretty decent work on this orc war boss. He kind of just stands there and takes their volleys. So we kind of back them off for a moment, and we focus down these orc arrow boys because they were just like a fresh unit. So we get some damage on them. Plus, there was a orc boy that decided to try to run out and catch our quarrelers, so we kind of pushed him back, and then we set up a wall right in front of their gate, so they wouldn't be able to do something like that again. So we're almost out of ammo with the quarrelers. We're already out of ammo for the grudge throwers. In a campaign, you would definitely want to be focusing on getting the skills in your lord tree that increases the ammo for the quarrelers and the ammo for the siege pieces, because it becomes they become way more effective in these kinds of battles. These could have gotten probably, a couple more 100 kills if they had like 20% more ammunition. Same thing with the quarrelers. They probably could have gotten another 100 kills or so if they had more ammunition. So what we do here is we use the miners to break down the gate, because it's one of like their skill traits that they can break down gates pretty quickly. And then we make an opening right here for our master engineer to be able to just take shots into these crowds and finish off the orc war boss, who's just barely hanging on to his life right now. And we're going to avoid going onto the wall and instead just take the fight in this choke point. This is kind of where the Dowie thrive, in these really tight choke points. They have already very high melee defense, and with the Lord's rally ability, he can buff their defense, or not their melee defense up, allowing them to withstand for quite some time, even against these elite greenskin infantry in the Blackworks. At this point, it comes down to mostly a grind. You just want to be very careful with not letting dwarf warrior units get completely wiped out. So when they get pretty low HP, cycle them out for some of the fresh dwarf warriors. And also if their vigor is really low, cycling them, or like, you know, switching them out for a freshly vigored unit will allow them to chip away more efficiently at the black orcs. But you have to remember, upon a retreat, your units become very vulnerable, so you kind of want to bring up your backup and allow them to get to the front line, and then bring the already damaged and worn out units, you know, into the back. As you can see, we lose quite a bit of ground here, which is okay. It's actually probably better for our units to be like in this little gateway area. The fewer orcs that can like get behind our line or like trap some of like our Dowie behind their line, the better. The longer they're going to last. We'll see that in the high tier army against the same garrison, with a few changes. We added one more black orc and we replaced the orc boys with orc boy big guns. That the casualties that are suffered here on these dwarf warriors are going to be like non-existent, and honestly, with a little more careful micromanagement, completely preventable. As I think we only end up losing a handful of units in the high tier siege battle, where here we lose a few hundred units. In fact, I think we lose just about as many units as the orcs do. Or I could be wrong. I think it ends up being like a 200 losses on our end and 700 losses on their end. But their infantry in the black orcs is definitely, and even the orc big guns, are definitely far superior to our dwarf warriors on a 1-to-1 like ratio. But we were able to wear them down from afar with our ranged tools, and then carefully isolate some of their units and rout them all off and secure victory. So even against like a higher tier force, the Dowie are like kind of like that faction that's known for being able to punch upward above like their tier class. So like their lower tier units, if used effectively, can perform at least better than other like low tier units against a high tier unit. And this is kind of just like one way of like demonstrating that, in that they were able to effectively take on a much higher tier army in a siege battle. But I stress that against that same army on an open battlefield, I don't believe the Dowie would have had a chance at winning. And that a fight like that is one that you have to strategically either avoid if you meet that army on the open battlefield, or you have to try to pressure them into a garrison and then take the fight to them while they're in a garrison like this. And then you can win the battle this way fairly effectively. As you can see, we didn't lose any like units. We lost models within the unit, but we did not lose any entire units, so we don't have to re-recruit units for the next turn, and we keep the experience, and they just heal up now in their freshly obtained garrison and just wait for the next greenskin horde to come. Now we're going to take a look at what that same battle might look like with an army probably in the mid to late game, so probably after turn 80 or so. You could probably get this army even earlier, but it's likely that, yeah, around turn 80s to 100 is like where you'd get an army like this one. So as you can see, we no longer have any quarrelers, and we're using two kinds of gyrocopters, the gyro bombers and the brimstone guns. We still have 3 trebuchets, or grudge thrower catapults, because they're still very effective during these siege battles. Now, a cannon could destroy these towers quicker, but the cannons cannot shoot into the wall effectively. So that's why I opt to keep at least one grudge thrower in my Dowie armies, but in this example I used 3. And instead of using the ammunition from the grudge throwers to take out the goblin rock lobbers, this time we are going to bring around the gyrocopters and gyro bombers to annihilate these units and eliminate them, or at least their effectiveness. Now, when we take a look at the army formation here, we have hammerers, which are much better at killing black orcs than any Dowie warrior ever will be. Amazing armor piercing and very high armor. We could actually take a look at their stats right now. I hope, possibly. It lets me. Okay, it doesn't look like it's going to let me. I don't know why. I'm not trying to look at the Lord, but it's clicking on the Lord anyways. Or it's highlighting the Lord anyways. But I think their armor piercing is, if I had to guess, like in the close to 20 or 30? I'm not exactly sure. And then of course we have the Iron Breakers, so they fulfill a similar role to the Miners in the last battle, which I think I forgot to show, but we can show the same principle here with the Iron Breakers, where they use their blasting charges to effectively eliminate some of the units on the wall. So you bring them fairly close to the wall, and then they throw their blasting charges onto the wall. And here we brought 2 Iron Drakes and a Torpedoer. And these guys have an optimal range and tool in their flamethrowers and grenade launchers for doing very good damage to units on walls. Over here you can see that our helicopters, our gyro bombers, gyrocopters and gyro bombers, are having a very good effect on these goblin rock lobbers, as there is no return fire from any of the units in this area, as all their archers are still on the wall over here. Now, I did try to use some of the bombs from the gyro bombers on one of these rock lobbers, and also from the gyrocopter with the brimstone gun, and it isn't very effective on killing the artillery crew because they're kind of spaced out in a really strange way. So just having them shoot into the rock lobber is probably the most effective way, even though this ammunition could have been used somewhere else on the black orcs. And I also found that like the bombs tend not to be actually that effective against the black orcs either. But overall, these pieces are still very powerful for siege battles, as they can destroy enemy artillery pieces very effectively, and they can freely roam around inside the garrison behind the walls and isolate high value units and eliminate them, or at least damage them severely, for when your infantry approach the wall or enter the wall. Now we have the grudge throwers. The grudge throwers, I just leave them on free fire, and I'm just letting them fire like wherever they so choose, as most of the time they'll just select targets on the wall. And they do a pretty good job at, you know, eliminating quite a few of the units on the wall. And as you can see, that first volley of the Iron Drakes completely wipes out whatever's standing on these walls. So a very effective unit for clearing walls, the Iron Drakes are. The Trollhammer Torpedo variant of the Iron Drakes are, I don't think, as good as the Iron Drakes in overall combat. Technically, I don't even like the Iron Drakes themselves all too much, simply because, like the Thunderers, they have a very poor line of sight, when it comes to like being positioned behind your own units, unless you have them up on a hill. And even then, it's difficult to prevent them from friendly fire. So like they tend to commit a lot of friendly fire, at least on like the open battlefield. But in scenarios like this, like in siege battles, they tend to be very, very effective. And as you can see, the torpedoes, this is probably where they get the most value out of the entire game. And also the Iron Drakes, the non-torpedo variant, is just eliminating units off the wall. But again, when it comes to using these units on the open battlefield, which you will be using them in an army like this, in the general campaign, you have to be very careful not to kill your own units with these units, as it is very easy. I think it would be very kind if Creative Assembly decided to enable the same feature that Siege pieces have, where you can click Alt or hold down Alt and then click in an area for units to shoot. That if you could do the same thing with Iron Drakes or like other like missile units like Quarrelers and like other Bowmen and stuff like that, just so that you could have more control over, you know, not killing your own units when you say tell like your Iron Drake to shoot out a unit that is, say, like right here fighting against your Iron Breakers, right? Because your Iron Breakers are like your impenetrable wall, and you want your Iron Drakes in the back, you know, doing the damage. But usually what ends up happening is they shoot right into the backs of like your own Iron Breakers and end up doing quite a bit of friendly fire. Now, within this amount of time, we did miss the gyrocopters killing their lord. It's simple enough. You just kind of hover over the lord and click on it, and he dies like in a matter of seconds to this many copters. And then we've also had them expending their ammo into the black orcs wherever they may be. Specifically the ones that end up on the wall, as because of the angle that the gyro bombers would be shooting from, they are much more effective at killing units on the wall also, as their projectiles will go through multiple targets instead of falling directly down on top of a couple targets. Once they are out of ammo, any unit that you see routing off the field like this, so these ones are shattered, so they're gone no matter what, but units like this that may be routing, specifically high value units like the Orc Big Guns, you essentially just have your gyro bombers just chase them off the battlefield so that they don't come back. And we basically just leave these guys to be. We have our Iron Drakes set up to prevent anyone from breaking through, like coming through the gate and interrupting their fire. We have both our Lord and our hero working on the gate so that in case we have to enter into the walls, we have, you know, a means of getting through, since we didn't blow open a piece of the wall with the catapults, which is an option, and since we don't want to climb onto the walls because we would lose more units than we actually need to if we were to do that. At this point, it's just about trying to get all our Iron Breakers to use up all their blasting charges, and our Iron Drakes to use, if not all of their ammo on the units on the wall, some of it. Sometimes it's better to save some of the ammunition if like there's like a monstrous unit that's like somewhere behind the wall that you need to kill. So if there's a giant or an Arachnarok spider, it would be wise to save some of the ammunition so that you can effectively kill it at a range. And how I would normally go about doing that, and Thunderers would be great for doing something like that, even better than these guys. And you can mix up the army in some fashion here. You could even drop some of the copters for like a group of Thunderers or two, or take out one of the Hammerers or one of the Iron Breakers for a Thunderer. And what you would, or even one of the catapults, honestly. Like, oh, as you can see here, I kind of was neglecting this tower, and whether it was online or not, and it began to do damage to our Grudge Thrower, and I think that's where we end up losing most of our units. So again, you just have to be kind of conscious of like this area getting like affected, and the tower coming on, and losing units that you may have left back, such as like these grudge throwers, which I eventually issue orders to run away. So as you can see, the gyro bombers are chasing off these weakened and routing units, as I said that they should be doing. And the rest of our units are just kind of standing here. And what I wanted to say about giants and Arachnarok spiders and other monstrous units, and the Thunderers, and possibly even these units, if they were to save some of their ammunition, is when the infantry on the other side, on the defending side, is this tattered, you can basically run some of your Iron Drakes or your hammers into this wall, like through the gate where like nobody is, and then have them climb up the wall from the backside, and then it would prevent them from suffering any kind of stamina like loss, so they don't lose vigor, so they're still at full fighting capacity. But even in a case like this where the units are this weak, you could probably just have them scale the wall too, and then once you clear the wall, if there's still the monstrous units inside the wall, you kind of have to do a value judgment. Are you going to lose more units fighting the monster inside the wall, or are you going to lose more units clearing the wall? Because if you're going to lose more units trying to fight the monster than clearing the wall, then you might want to save some of the ammo, clear the wall with your infantry units, and then bring your missile units like Thunderers or the Iron Drakes onto the wall, and then they can shoot at the monstrous units without getting any fire in return, or being able to get hit by the monstrous units, because they can't climb the wall and they just have to stand there and take the damage. So as you can see there, all the units are routing now after a couple gyro bombers drop bombs on these black orcs, and that's pretty much the battle. Now the camera work there might have been a little sloppy, but I hope that the overall picture was maintained and the information was still understandable. And I hope that helps your next Dowie campaign and how you may approach siege battles. I'm probably going to I'm going to do a redo of the elf video, kind of make it a single video with 2 parts like this one. As you can see, the results of fighting like this, we only end up losing 12 units, and we clear out a garrison of 1,180, and we effectively kill 700 of them. As you can see, the torpedoes, like I said, they shine in situations like this, even more so than the regular Iron Drakes. So if you wanted to use the torpedoes in this situation over the Iron Drakes, it is something that you can play around with in like your battle. But you also have to keep in mind the regular battles on the open fields and not just the siege battles, where I think the Iron Drakes might be a little bit better than the torpedoers. Simply because when it comes to friendly fire, the Iron Drakes still do less friendly fire typically to your units than the Iron Drakes with torpedoes do. I think mostly it has to do with not having better accuracy in any way, but simply because the armor piercing on the torpedoers is much higher, and your frontline infantry rely heavily on their heavy armor. So you end up killing more of your units with the torpedoers than you would with the regular Iron Drakes, but the regular torpedoers tend to do better against like higher armored units anyways, is like the reason why, not because like the Iron Drakes are more accurate or better at killing other units, especially heavier armored ones. But definitely on siege battles, their arc of fire is ideal. The Iron Drakes is very strong, but it's not as ideal as the torpedoers. They suffer from less line of sight issues because of their arc fire, where the torpedoers, or not the torpedoers, but the regular Iron Drakes still have like a very low arc fire with the flamethrower, where the grenade launchers have a very like steep one. So it's something to experiment with. You could drop some of the gyro bombers too, and bring one more torpedoer, because really the virtue in the gyro bombers is routing units off the field and destroying enemy siege equipment, and you can effectively do that with even just like one gyro bomber. So like that would leave you like 3 unit spaces to either add more torpedoes, add thunderers, maybe a cannon, and get rid of one of the grudge throwers, and just bring 2 grudge throwers, use the cannon to destroy the towers and the grudge throwers to shoot into the walls. There's a few different ways of doing this, but this is kind of just like a general way of approaching siege battles as a high tier Dowie army. All right, YouTube. I'll catch you later. Hopefully my next video is out later this week too. I think I'm going to do Vampire Coast as the next faction after redoing the High Elf one. So if you haven't seen those videos, check them out. Subscribe, like the video, leave a comment. Can't wait to talk to you guys in the comment sections or on my stream. Follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/LeroyKid. And see you guys later.